Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Welcome to the Stoa. I am Rachel, and we are here on our fourth and final session of our Sensemaker in Residence series with Nora Bateson. Nora is a filmmaker and author. She's an educator, and she is going to continue our exploration into the hallway of hallways. So as we go along, please put your questions for Nora in the chat. When it's time for Q&A, I will ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question, or if you prefer I can read it for you, just let me know. Keep in mind, this is going to be recorded and posted to YouTube. And all that being said, Nora, I will hand it over to you.
Okay. What? Our final session? What? How did that happen? I was just telling Peter and Rachel how much I have really enjoyed doing these, and how they felt a little bit untamed in this really wonderful way, and that it was a really wonderful invitation, Peter, to start with this hallway of hallways piece, because let's face it, there has been there's been a group of people, there have been many groups of people for decades trying to address so many of the same issues and not getting anywhere. And their intentions are good, and they have, some of them even have funding, imagine that. And they have teams of people working with them, imagine that. And all sorts of fantastic theory and possibility, and yet there's so much that isn't changing, or rather that is changing, but maybe not in the direction that might produce more vitality and integrity. So what in the world is going on? And I have I've enjoyed opening up this territory in this hallway of hallways, a little sequence of what some of the more dangerous undercurrents, with the things you can't quite get words around, the places where there's no way to get it actually into the boardroom to discuss this stuff. And I think these are the important issues. I think that this is that moment when it has, like I was just saying to Peter and Rachel, it has become very clear already. We get this, we're all interconnected, and we have to collaborate. We got that. That much is clear. Now, what does that actually mean? Where does that actually happen? What is it about the difference between it being so easy to say that and have it actually be a way of life? And so these 4 sessions have been a time to kind of explore that murky, shadowy, confusing space. And on the first day that we had together, we did a little dive into the way of paying attention to the levels of abstraction of the things we're working on. And in that session, we started to really get at the difference between what it is we're talking about and what it is to be within that complexity. That the words around complexity are not the complexity. In fact, I think you could say that the words around complexity, the jargon and the vocabulary of our studies of complexity, are a really fascinating cultural artifact of the way in which we're attempting to make sense of this. And I want to add that this is definitely Western culture, because indigenous cultures have had this understanding for a very long time. But isn't it fascinating that we have this language, and then that it gets projected and used in such a way that the projects that get described through it are somehow sterile of the weird stuff, of what it is to think about your own identity, of what it is to want to be wanted, of what it is to be in mutual learning and dignity with other people who are also in the midst of painful changes, confusing changes. It's not that clean and simple. This simple little, we're all interconnected and we have to collaborate thing, it's just not that simple. The interdependency of life is a nice little phraseology, but what is that? What is it when the things you're interdependent with are the things that are prohibiting the possibility of life in the future? How does addiction figure into this? Addiction to petroleum, addiction to ways of thinking about relevance, addiction to comfort, addiction to our ideas, our epistemological frames. Addiction to a system that is predatory at its basis. And how do we actually get out of that? So it's this business of being in the matrix, okay? So I am the system, you are the system. And on that first day, we played with these different levels of abstraction. We talked about the map is not the territory. The name is not the thing named. The music is not the score of the music. And the way in which so many of our actions are given their process of decision is through looking at information that is in the map, but not the territory. So you can see the symptom, whether it's climate change or economic disaster or coronavirus or families that are in danger. But the conditions in which those symptoms have come to be, those conditions are not just a kind of archipelago of islands of stuff. They are relationships. It's not just that and nothing more, right? So then we played with transcontextual process, and we looked at the ways in which things are happening in multiple contexts at the same time, and how those contexts start to shift the other contexts, how this responsiveness, how what happens in a coronavirus is the health system starts to shift, the education system starts to shift, the economic system starts to shift, the political system, and all those systems start to shift each other. And we're all in the middle of it, sitting in our Zoom calls inside our houses, wondering what's going to happen now? Where will we be in spring of 2021? And we were looking at this transcontextuality, and the transcontextual stuff is also difficult. It's also difficult because it doesn't sit on a two-dimensional piece of paper. You can't give it description there. So how do you know it? How do you become familiar with that multi-dimensional relational process of all these things coming together? And then we talked about double binds and how you can get caught in more than one context at a time. And when you get caught at more than one context, what do you do? How do you deal with the fact that basically we're double binded from all directions? That in order to survive, we're taking part in, taking part in processes that we don't want to be taking part in. In order to pay the rent, we have to make money. We have to go out. We have to drive cars. We have to ride buses. We have to buy clothing that are made by slaves. We have to go to the grocery store. We're taking part in monocropping. And then if it's sad, the next thing you know, or there's a feeling of lostness and illness, and then we're in with the big pharma. And no matter which way you turn, you're in it, to the point where my 24-year-old daughter says to me, "Mama, how do I be a good person? How do I be a good person when all the things I do, everything I do, is attached to the exploitation of other people and the world around me? How do I be a good person?" And that's a very good question she's asking. And the double bind brings us to thinking about how to bring more context into the way that we're looking at things. How do we bring more context in? So we start to see things beyond the polarities, beyond the binaries, beyond the symptoms. We're seeing down into the relational processes. We're not just listing stakeholders, we're looking at what's the relationship between them. We're not just listing sectors and conditions. It's about what's in the relationship between them. And then we find ourselves recognizing, oh, what Peter sees and what I see are not the same. What Leslie sees and what Asha sees are not the same. And I have to observe the observer and recognize there is no one position. There is no one description. Which, okay, again, that's one of those super easy things to say. We need multiple description. We need multiplicities to understand the complexity. Of course we do. Of course we do. But the multiplicity alone won't do it. Just getting lots of versions won't do it. We're going to have to dive deeper than that. And this is the piece where I was saying to Peter before the show today, I just love doing this with you because it's just so unhinged. We're so off territory. We're so in the deep end. And I love that because here we actually are. Here we are. And the kind of things that are holding us all into patterns of behavior, of communication, of relationship with ourselves, our families, each other, and the natural world. We're held in relationships that we know are not the most vitalizing relationships. We know that. But what's going on? And so there is this notion that you can put on your professional hat and go do your professional work. And while you're doing your professional work, that you're actually going to speak about all this interdependency and relationships and complexity. And if you weren't somehow interested in all of that, you probably wouldn't be in this session with me today. But this is more than that. This is a way of life. This is about actually not just the things you say, but the dreams behind them. Not just the dreams behind them, but other people's dreams and how they've responded to yours. And by dreams, I don't mean necessarily the things at night. I mean the things that you think about when you think about what next year will be. The things that you think about when you think about how I'm going to be, what I'm going to do. And who am I? So I wanted to share this next little tricky, sticky, untamed, unhinged, totally devilish little piece with you today. Because I'm absolutely tired of swimming at the shallow end of the pool. I'm absolutely over it. And when I'm in discussions with funders or with people who are working with very big organizations who are supposedly out there to try to do big projects, to do good things, there's no space to deal with what's actually happening. It's so frustrating. It's all map, baby, no territory. And this information that I call warm data, this information that is in all those relational processes doesn't count. It isn't anywhere. It isn't possible to create it as a deliverable. It isn't possible to measure it. It isn't possible to define it. Does that mean it's not real? When my daughter asks, how do I be a good person? She's asking that question. Does it mean it's not real? So the piece that I want to bring in today has kind of two pieces to it, all right? And one of them is, it's fun and it's not so hard to get, but it's really hard to say. And this is the word for how systems fall apart. And it's a word my father coined. And the word, I'll put it in the chat, okay? The word is schismogenesis. You see it? Schismogenesis. Schismo, to break. Genesis, to make, to create, to birth, to touch. So this is that other thing. Not just how systems are in interdependency, but how they fall out of that. How systems break. And yeah, there we go. There's the Wikipedia on schismogenesis. That'll keep you busy for the next while. And there are a few different kinds of schismogenesis. Okay, so my father and his team, they talked about two kinds. And one of them was complementary. And anyway, let me hold on. My keyboard is broken. Complementary. Okay, complementary schismogenesis is when you get a relationship, right? Because if systems are going to fall apart, they don't fall apart because of the parts. They fall apart because of the relationships, first of all, right? Number one piece here. They don't come together. They are not healed by the parts, and they do not fall apart. They are not destroyed by the parts. It's the relationships. It's the relationships. Always in the relationships, like connective tissues and fibers, like the way notes are relating to each other. Systemic living systems are all about relationships. So complementary schismogenesis is when there's a relationship that is not the same. So you have one, but it's in complement. So one of the people might be more dominant than the other, or it could be nations. One nation is more dominant, or it could be, one member of the family, or it could be a marriage, and one is more dominant than the other. And their complementary relationship is that actually works. One is more subservient or demure, and the other one is more confident and dominant. And that's okay. It's good for a while. You know, have you ever been traveling with someone and one person wanted to make all the decisions and the other person was fine? They were like, yeah, I'm good. Let's just go wherever we want to go. That's great for a while. And then it starts to become extreme. And the dominance grows ever more dominant, and the softer, the less dominant one becomes less and less dominant. And the gap between them widens. The gap widens. When the gap widens, pretty soon there's not much to be in relationship around anymore. It falls apart, it breaks. And the other one is symmetrical. Symmetrical schismogenesis is not like that. Symmetrical schismogenesis is where you're more in a competition, okay, where you're more at the same level, and you know, I get a new job, so you got to get an award. You get an award, so I got to get a new publisher. I get a new publisher, so you get a new TV show. You get a new TV show, so I got to get a new research grant, right? And we're doing this, and we're getting more and more competitive. And at first, that competition is really creative. It's giving us juice, and I'm bouncing off you, and you're bouncing off me. But pretty soon, it's not like that anymore. And I don't want to be in that relationship anymore. It hurts me and it hurts you. And we don't want to do that anymore. But we don't know how to stop. And it keeps going until it breaks us. And that's symmetrical schismogenesis. There's a third kind of schismogenesis. This kind was developed by a group of people in Finland. And you'll find it on the bottom of the Wikipedia page there that's in the chat. And it's about systems holdback. Systems holdback is another thing. Systems holdback is where I don't put into the relationship what I could, because I know that you're not putting in what you could. And you don't put in what you could because you know that I'm not putting in what I could. And I don't put in when you, because it's confirmed that I shouldn't have. And anyone who sticks their neck out knows that they're either going to get harvested, they're going to get taken for granted, they're going to get their head chopped off, they're going to get used and abused and served on the floor. So they don't do it. The logic is mind yourself, take care of your own. Don't give away your wine. People will take it. Hold back. Don't be too eager. Don't make yourself available. Don't make yourself vulnerable. People will steal you, and you'll have nothing of you left. You'll give too much. Okay, this is systems holdback. And the problem with that is that if you do that, then the other people don't want to give what they could give. And pretty soon, there's nothing in the relationship. All the vitality, all the human dignity, all the possibility for us to meet and become entangled and share and mutually learn, all of that is gone. If nature did systems holdback, we'd be in big trouble. So systems holdback. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about systems holdback is, first of all, it's a great thing to just be able to go, systems holdback. That's what's going on here. And recognize it when you find it in your day. Recognize it when you're in a group of people and you realize you don't want to provide something, you don't want to give something because you're afraid it will be taken, or you don't want to step out because you know they're not going to step out. But in this moment, I don't know how we get out if we don't step out. I just don't know. I think at this point, there is a time when people who are willing to not hold back are the ones that are going to allow the new perceptions to emerge. If everybody just stays in their lane, stays in their role, stays in their script, then we don't actually go anywhere. It all stays the same. Right? If everybody stays in their role, nothing changes. If everybody stays in their role. So that means as parents, we have to get out of our role and go beyond. As lovers, we have to go out of our role and go beyond. As friends, we have to go beyond our role. As employees and employers, as family therapists, as coaches, as artists, as podcast producers, we have to go past the edge of what we thought our role was, way past, and bring that transcontextuality in. That's messy. And in fact, there are laws against it. You know, teachers are supposed to just be teachers, and doctors are supposed to just be doctors, and police are just supposed to be police. And what happens when you have a child, a teenager who's in trouble? And the only way that the police can describe that person is with the language of the law. And the only way the counselor can describe that person is with the language of diagnosis. And the only way the teacher can describe that person is with the language of academic achievement and classroom behavior. Where is that kid? Where is that kid? So in order to deal with the complexity we live within, we have to be able to show up with our complexity, okay? Ross Acuff talked about requisite variety. And you just can't meet the complexity we live within without your own complexity. And your own complexity is not on a Post-it. It's not on a Post-it. It's not in a jargon. It's not in a jar. It's not on a shelf. It's not in a figure out your personality quiz. Your own complexity is so rich that you don't even know it. And everybody else's is too. So I want to share now a slide with you. And there's a few people in this room who've seen this slide before. But, oh, thanks for making me co-host. But it's one of my favorite slides. Oh gosh, I think I've pushed the wrong button here. Let's see. We'll just look at it this way. So can you see this fox here in the snow? Can you see that fox? And now, if you ask yourself, where is the edge of that fox? Where's the edge of it? I mean, you could think, okay, the edge of the fox is its fur. The edge of the fox is its territory. The edge of the fox is its context. And if you look at this stick bug, can you see the stick bug in the tree? And I wrote a paper once, I think it's on the internet somewhere, and it's called Eating Sand. And in that paper, I'm talking about how it is to be a stick bug. Because we are stick bugs. We're stick bugs and we're in a tree. The system that we live in is the tree. And we're stick bugs. And we're like running around having all these meetings with all these Post-its saying, we got to change the tree. We got to change the tree. But there are so many ways, so many contexts in which the tree is a description of the stick bug. And the stick bug is a description of the tree. So this makes this whole question of what the heck do we mean by systems change significantly more difficult. I say we welcome that difficulty and dive in with both feet. This is a task of another order of imagination, another kind of conversation, another whole possibility of thinking, what do we mean by change? What do we mean by change? When every idea that this stick bug produces has something to do with the tree and making the tree continue, how does the stick bug change the tree? Because that's where we are, friends. And I'm not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is it's important that we go in deeper, into the deep wild end of the pool, where the wilderness of how we could possibly be in interaction is opened up and not delegated or defined or in any way delimited by the airs and the tones, the aesthetic of our professionalism or the corporate office space or that which the politicians or the grant givers or the municipalities say is possible. We're going to have to go way, 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 way beyond them and the structures that they're stuck in, way beyond those roles. Because here's this little frog. This little frog. And where's the edge of that little frog? What are the, I mean, think about the hundreds of thousands of years of conversation at a physiological level that have allowed that frog to become a description of its context. And look at yourself right now. If you just look down at your clothes, look around your room, look at everything about yourself and ask yourself, in what way am I a description of my contexts? You think you're not camouflaging? Ha ha ha. We are definitely camouflaging. So, you know, just as you wake up tomorrow morning in your leaf gecko self, here's the leaf gecko, ask yourself what it means to have the leaf gecko that you are become somehow in a different relationship with the leaves that you have become. That's another kind of question. Where's the edge of the fox? And where's the edge of you? And in what way are we describing the systems that we're in? Just by doing what we do. When my daughter asks me, how do I be a good person? Isn't that really what she's saying? I'm a stick bug and I need to figure out about this tree. Not easy. This is not easy stuff. In the hallway of hallways, we never do the easy stuff. I'm assuming you can do the easy stuff with other folks, but not here. Here we go deep diving. Because for me, these are the questions that I think about. This is where I want to This is where I want to work. This is where I want to play. This is where I want to learn. This is where I want to make art. This is where I want to be in relationship with you and my children. This is where I want to not hold back from. And I don't know what's there. And I wouldn't know how to say if I did. I'm not sure that it's sayable. But I don't know how we get out without it. So I think it's fun. And I think it's a little bit intellectual, but it's also living somewhere else. That question is living somewhere else. It's something in my body. It's something in my heart. It's something in the way words taste in my mouth. In the way, I don't know. I mean, honestly, in the way that I was thinking about what to say in here today and how to say it. And thinking, well, maybe I should, not put this out there because somebody might, put it in their blog post and misunderstand me, and they could, make everything super shallow and make it into a technique, and they could make it into a method, and it could become garbage. And then I thought, and if it does, then we throw it away. So there's something about not holding back now, about saying, if you knew me well, you would know that I would give you everything. And that's actually, there's nothing to lose there. Especially if there's people like you guys around. So now we've done some stuff. We did some double bind. We did some contextual work. We did some abstraction, logical typing. And this piece that we just did is the sort of barely into the opening of a whole piece on abductive process, but we don't have time to go all the way into that because if so, I'd have you for a week, and Peter might not mind. He might give you to me for a week. But what I'd like to do actually is give you some time to ask questions and have discussion now. So let's open it up. How are you feeling, stick bugs? What's in your elbows?
We'll start with a question from David. David, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, I have to say I'm a little bit of a cheater because I just got done with the Warm Data Lab, but this question beckons deeply in me. So I feel it as you're talking. I feel on the edge, like ready to jump off into the void. My stomach just lurches with the fear of the fall. So falling in love with the transcontextual is no safe love affair. Though I want to be wanted by nature, the pit in my stomach says, I don't know if I can stand this much uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And the void beckons. With all of this, how do we abandon safety and reconcile responsibility? So I'm asking my own question.
Yeah. And, we talk about safety in the Warm Data course quite a bit. And what the heck is it? What do we mean safe? Safe in what way? Like, who's safe at this point? What is safety except for a perpetuation of the things that are really unsafe? So I think the only thing I can say is there are some days, David, in all honesty, when I need to, go in my turtle shell because it hurts too much, and I get harvested, and I get, I go out in the world and it hurts. And there's other days when I can see so clearly, I can perceive so clearly that there's nothing to do but just give, just do it, just go. And then I go, and then I meet another level. and I have to kind of tuck in, and I have to learn, and I have to heal. But it's that kind of iterative process. And each time I tuck in and I whatever, go in my duvet and I watch Netflix overnight, and I, hide from the world, and I don't respond to my emails, and I just want to cry. And then I take a walk in the woods, and I read some poetry, and I get it together. And somehow I find that strength that is something like music. It's something like love. It's something like the fiber of fire. And then I can go another little bit, and I can give everything again. And each time I get a little stronger. And by strength, I don't mean rigidity. I mean warmth. Strength is something warm. So, yeah.
If I can, yeah, there's a thing here that's I think the responsibility part comes a little more clear for me.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned to trust in myself, and it's been a challenge, is I learned to trust my vulnerability. And it is scary. There's something, the vulnerability both aspects of that I think are important. And one of the things I mean here with responsibility is that if I think that I can trust the delegation of the answer to how do I surrender to this thing, to someone else, to another institution or another person, then I give up my ability to trust my own vulnerability. And so, and yet when I do give into that, give into nature fully, there are going to be those parts that pull and tug on my vulnerability in ways that I have to then reclaim my own boundary of knowing myself. So what I mean by safety is I can't do it in a way that guarantees that people are going to respect my inner knowing. That's the part that I have to do.
You certainly can't. But you know what else? It's not a binary. So it's not like someone either understands you or they don't. They might kind of understand you, and you might kind of understand you, and you might be kind of safe, and you might be kind of vulnerable. So it's all spectrum of possibilities, and some of that spectrum it's a spectrum of sounds we haven't heard yet, and colors we haven't seen yet. It's a spectrum of language we haven't spoken in yet. So I mean, my feeling is that, is it safe? I mean, it's the only thing I can think of that's safe. And yet, where I get into trouble is when I keep deferring to thinking we need to have leadership, we need to have mechanism, we need to have strategy, I need to defer to this organization that is somehow above me and can operate at some larger scale. I hate that word, right? And when I do that, I fall to pieces, because there's nothing there, and those structures can't move. I mean, we've been trying to move them for decades. And just yesterday, I had 2 conversations with people at that level, and they're like, yeah, the structures can't move. We cannot. They said, we love to do complexity. We really wish we could figure out how, but none of our projects come out complex. And it was like, well, do you have measurements on them? And they said, yes, of course we do. And I said, well, there you go. You could start by letting go of that. No way. Or even just that the projects are coming from somewhere else. You don't get to decide what the project is. So it's I don't know, but it's definitely going to be different. We're going to have a different kind of conversation and do different kinds of work if we want to have any kind of different results. And yet we keep deferring to the same patterns. I do it too, just so you know. I see some other questions though. Yeah, let's open it up.
Yeah. Gil, did you have a question?
I do. Good morning, Nora.
Good morning, Gil.
And thank you. Great to see you, and wonderful to be with you in this series. I particularly appreciated the unpacking of schismogenesis and the third dimension of it, which reveals so much. So, in the few years that we've known each other, I've loved watching this story evolve, and you know that I've been living a lot in a different version of the same story. That come exploring much more in an ontological, philosophical, linguistic way how we do all this. And I hear you in a context that is much more poetic, but also much more embodied in a different way. It's all embodied. It's all shows up, here. Not we talk about brains and minds, but we're really living in body, mind, system, context of contexts, edges that are always semi-permeable. It's part of the problem with the word edge. We think of, crisp lines, and they're never there, and there would not be life without semi-permeability of the membranes that enclose our little bags of stuff at every level. Pardon me for the rambling introduction. One more piece about that. You talk about descriptions, and I talk about interpretations, and one of the lessons here is that it's interpretations all the way down. Mm-hmm. We don't live without interpretations. There's nothing hard that we encounter in the world, but we live as though it is. So to my question, very specific. Here in the States, as you know, we're in a mess of messes. We have a president who doesn't just deny science and doesn't just refuse to invite responsible action in solidarity with each other's bodies, but actually says, "Oh, go be with your family on Thanksgiving." Encourages that. So there's that. But greater concern for me is the tens of millions of people in this country who eat that up, who live in that, who find their meaning in that. In my cohort, there are folks who say, hell with them. There are folks who say, well, we've got to talk to them and explain things to them. There are some folks who are a little bit more awake who say, no, actually, maybe we need to listen to them and understand their interpretation of the world better. But at every turn, it feels like a dead end. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you do or would or might or could engage across edges that feel so stiff and rigid and impenetrable. How do we engage with others of us who live in different languages and profoundly different interpretations? Where do you start? Where does it lead? What surprises you?
I start indirectly.
Uh-huh.
That's the first thing.
Uh-huh.
And I start in the exchange of story across multiple contexts and through multiple contexts. So that's what the whole warm data work is, basically, is this work through asking questions and then allowing people to story through them through multiple contextual. It's the context of contexts, basically. And what I have found over and over and over again is that the polarities are in the scripts. We have scripts, and we're learning those scripts, and those scripts are ossified and hardened and crystallized by all kinds of contextual things, which group you're aligned with, what that group holds, what this group holds, how any of us are delineated and divided and describing ourselves. So that scripting is generating more polarity. I mean, the fact is, we're all stick bugs. We're all in this. And it's not like there is really I don't want to be cliche because, I try to avoid that as much as possible. But for heaven's sakes, it's not like there are any good guys. I mean, I don't mean to be depressing, but the fact is that there, the whole machine is running and we're in it. We are it. I mean, my living room is filled with, proof positive of the colonial history that I am a part of. I can't separate myself from that. So I don't feel like I'm going to take any high ground. And what I feel is curiosity and love. And I feel very dubious of the scripting, because this notion that, I mean, I think it's on all the sides, because it's more than one side. And communication now has really become dangerous, because there's really nothing you can say that isn't going to be, you couldn't get your head chopped off by someone for saying. So I think that is a symptom actually of, okay, hang with me for a second, because I'm going to say something that's really tricky. And that is that the illusions we live within are built in through the relationships that we're in. We have grown these illusions in our relationships, and it could be that those relationships have to radically change shape or break in certain ways in order for them to find new patterns of being, in order for us to be in new ways of seeing ourselves and each other. The relationships and the illusions we share are in those relationships. So it's it's kind of like there's something in the blood of the system, and it might need to change. And that change is not going to be easy, and it's going to feel like everything in the world is breaking, right? How would the stick bug feel if the tree was changing? Who would the fox be if the tundra wasn't white? Right? That's a radical shift of identity and relationship to the world around you, and learning to be in it and how to be in it, and what, right? Everything is different. So these things are old, and they've been very violent, and they've been legitimized. The epistemological hypocrisies and illusions and the underlying premises of what's in it for me. How do I get ahead? There's a lot of people in the climate work trying to get ahead, right? And there's no way to do that. I mean, do you know how many eco conferences I've been to where I had to peel someone's hand off my knee under the table while they were actually giving a talk about interdependency and interconnectedness? Right. So what I'm saying is the change is deep. It's deeper than a discourse. It's deeper than a new jargon. Does that help at all? I don't know. Maybe. For me, that's what I'm finding, is that it's in the way we make sense between the contexts. Yeah. You're muted, so I don't hear what you're saying, but I see your lips moving.
Sorry, I got myself muted. Yes, it does make sense. It's rich, and it feels very much worth diving into and spending some time in these waters. One thing that's an echo part of it that I've found very fruitful for me is to listen more carefully to my own scripts.
Mm.
Is to have an observer on my shoulder watching the words that are coming out of my mouth or that are spinning in my head, and asking myself, oh, where's that from? How do I know that? Is that what I really mean? Is that quote true? What context is that living in? And watching that for myself makes me a better listener of the stories behind the stories that I hear from other people, all of which provides openings.
Yeah.
I could go on, but let me leave room for other people. I'll step back here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil.
Nora, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Ruslan, do you have a question?
Thank you. Nora, you've just talked about how dangerous communication has become. And my question was associated with that. How can we open up communication to transparency, to openness to connect with everything unconditionally?
I mean, the thing about this is that communication isn't really what's on the transcript. It isn't really what's said or what's not said. It's actually what it's possible to say. Right? So if you start there and you think about what's it possible to say, that's why I was saying I love this, because I absolutely took Peter on his invitation to say things it wasn't possible to say in here. We've been saying all kinds of things that you're not supposed to say here. And so I think for me that has everything to do with I just have to say this. It has everything to do with the arts. We have got to lean into the arts. When we start to speak or express ourselves in prose, what we're doing is we're delimiting the possibilities of meaning, right? And in that prose discussion, there is this and there is that and there is this and there is that and it is and it's this and it's that. And if there's more room in there for the poetic possibilities, there's a great violence in what I would call ising, saying how it is, and everyone's always going around ising everything. This is how it is, and that's how it is. And when someone starts telling you how it is, then there's no room to think about what other kind of ising is going on. There's lots of isings going on. There's many contexts happening. What do you mean that's how it is? There's other stuff. So going beyond that kind of link chain of communicational limits and opening into the surprise. And there's all kinds of danger there too, because poetry is certainly not safe either. It's not like art hasn't been used against us. Metaphor can be manipulated. So it isn't about that, but it has something to do with just paying such attention. Just pay attention to the relationships that are going on. And that each word is not the word that you think you're saying. It's the word that is being received. And so we think, I said this, that, and we live our lives like everything we were going to say was going to be taken to court, and we could prove we were right or wrong, or we said it or we didn't say it. But there's so much that we're saying that we're not saying. That's in the implications. And this is where I feel like with the warm data, we just have to acknowledge that there's a whole lot more going on than that which is on the transcript. And so for me, that question that you're asking has to do with paying really close attention and knowing you're going to screw up. And when you screw up, saying, I screwed up. What does it look like to watch someone learn? Right? To actually witness someone learning something. And that's a really cool thing. Because if you introduce that into the relationship that you're in, then what you're introducing is a meta message that says, in this relationship, we can learn. Right? So I mean, that's, for me, that's a really big piece, is when there's the possibility to change your mind. And to, I mean, who are we to each other if we hold each other to a kind of, the wrong kind of integrity? Okay, the wrong kind of integrity is the kind where you play by all the rules and you're consistent with them. Because I don't want you to be who you were yesterday. I hope that you changed your mind about some things, that you feel differently about some things, that you're responding to the way the world is responding to you, and there's actual responsiveness, as opposed to, this is what I said, this is what I meant, this is what I'm always going to mean, because this is how it is. See what I mean about that is thing? And when everything's in transformations, what is, I don't know. That, as one president said. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a lot of great discussions and questions coming up, but we have time for just a few final thoughts from you, Nora, before our announcement. So I'll hand it to you.
Well, I think that it's, I'm happy to. Do you want to do one more question, or should we, yeah, let's do one more comment or question or thought that's coming up for you. There's all kinds of stuff happening in the chat, and I'm dying to read it, but I can't read it while I'm looking at all of you. So there's stuff in there. What's happening in there? Somebody tell me.
Yeah, there's all sorts of juicy stuff. Cristiano, I think, had a comment that was getting a lot of response. Do you want to share your thoughts?
Hi, I don't know how to share it, so I can just read it, can be. I was not prepared to this. So I was saying that we should step out from the compulsive, never-ending fractal complexification of mapping maps on and against maps, because I see that a lot also in this arena of meaning makers, there is a tendency to making a lot of maps, making maps that quote other maps, that build up on other maps, that criticize other maps, and to find the best map ever. So I was just inspired to say, let's get the fucking out and explore the territory to rediscover the magic and the sacred. So to make a movement that never one ever did before in that context, and see what happens instead of staying on the maps. This is more or less was my comment.
I'm coming with you. Let's go.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing is, sometimes mapping can be fun. Just don't believe the map. Right? If you want to make a map, but don't think it's the actual territory. As long as you remember it's just a map, then the actual making of it could be cool. But there's a lot of really boring maps out there. I'm really, to my mind, they should be much more beautiful. If you're going to make one, it should be beautiful, or horrifying, or, you know, it should be something beyond a declaration of sterility. And so often when I see or feel a map, it just feels like eating cardboard. It doesn't feel like life. And so I think if we're going to make maps, that they should be far more delicious. And then be willing to throw them out. Do the dishes and throw them out. Yeah. And mysterious, yes. Yes. Okay, so we're winding up. We are winding up. And First of all, I just really want to say thank you to all of you for giving me this wonderful opportunity just to be wild and be free. And I've really enjoyed it. And also to Peter and Rachel and the Stoa. And there's a new Sense Maker series coming on the Stoa. And I hear that Jordan Hall is going to be in it. And okay, I knew the other people, but I have now forgotten. Can you remind me, Rachel?
You can check it out on stoa.ca. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming up, and we'll put some in the chat too.
Yeah. So so I'm being replaced like a part in a truck. But I think it's going to be great, and this is a wonderful series. And I guess I just I mean I definitely want to end with a poem, right? We got to end with some poetry. All right. Let me find something good here for you. Oh, this is the perfect one. I just opened up to the perfect one. It's from this book that I wrote, and it's called The Thing Is. The thing is, time rolled us around like river rocks, wore the edges round, soft enough to hold now without breaking the skin, like stepping barefoot through sun-warmed prairies, your touch telling mine a story. It illustrates in epiphanies. Quick movement, and the slippery stones slide back into the water, where intuition swims below the line of logic. There, the water is slow and ancient, whispering breathy prophecies, just out of range, mouthing directions through wobbly waves. Not quite seeable, easily misheard. Which way? What did you say? We are mapping ourselves in illegible script. In the pleasure, the play, the lightness, weightlessly draped together, I am barely holding you. It just is. Jasmine instinctively bends into the spot where the shadow does not reach. Holograms of glass shards have been projected onto our path, are placed there to remind us to tread carefully. But the river knows its course. So I'll end with that. And thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Nora. Thank you from all of us at the Stoa for guiding us on this slippery, juicy, unhinged ride down the hallway. Awesome, and you're totally irreplaceable. We have so many exciting events coming up. Check out thestoa.ca. Jordan Hall coming up as a sense maker in residence. An event coming up today at 3 p.m. Eastern is Stoic Provocations, and it's called Deep Fake It Till You Make It with Stephanie Lepp. And also I'm going to tag in David. He's going to let us know about another event coming up, and check the chats for links to those. David?
So coming up tonight is the Becoming Dragon Integration Shadow card deck with Chris Beasley. I've known Chris Beasley for almost 3 years. As we've been talking about the maps, you may know that occasionally we see on maps the dragons at the edge of the map in the uncharted territories. Here be dragons. Becoming Dragon is you are that dragon at the edge of the map.
Cool.
I highly recommend Nora's work for the warm data, for the deep dive, and for a simpler way to kind of dip your toe into the waters of the unknown. The Becoming Dragon card deck was a perfect place to get started. So come to that tonight and find out more.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay. Thank you, Nora. Thank you.
Yeah.